Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I just saw a study come through my feed. Another study on these airflow restriction masks that people are using. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing. Let's do a little bit of crafting and let's talk about this. All right, this is interesting because we already know, based on all the data out there and just basic physiology, that these things are an absolute and complete ripoff when it comes to endurance training. They actually improve your endurance less. They improve your endurance less if you had done the same amount of training without the mask, meaning your stamina will improve from any endurance work that you do. That's a given. But wearing the mask has actually been found, and this is just basic physiology. No one would expect any different who knows physiology. That's why these masks have always been a ripoff since day one. Anyone who knows physiology and the whole purpose of high altitude training already knew that these things were a con before even looking at any data. But yeah, when you wear them, you gain less additional endurance from doing endurance work than had you not worn them at all. And a lot of people are like, that doesn't make sense. It restricts your airflow, so it should improve endurance. No, because it restricts your airflow, you don't improve your endurance as much. And that's the whole point. The only thing that you get better at from wearing the training mask is training with the mask on. It actually improves your non-mask athletic ability less than had you trained without the mask. Specificity of training here, guys. It's that simple. You just simply can't get as much oxygen and everything through your body because of the mask restricting airflow. Therefore, there's detriment. So they decided to test them with weight training now with both chest presses and squats to see how many reps people could get with 75% of their 1 rep max. Sure enough, in the studies they did, they found that people with the masks on, even starting with the first set and all the way up through the 5th set, it got worse and worse as the sets went, could perform less reps on their exercises with the mask on. Now, some people would say, well, that's to be expected because they haven't adapted to the mask, but because it made their rate of perceived exertion higher, they're going to get more benefit out of it. Well, here's what actually happened. Yes, it increased the rate of perceived exertion, but it didn't create any beneficial metabolites in the blood. And that's the kicker. If these masks actually did anything to improve endurance, you would, through the extra work that you seem to do because it's harder to do stuff with the mask, you would see a biological response in the body. You would see a shift in blood markers to show that. Well, they didn't find them. So all they actually did, and this is the conclusions the researchers came to, which, I'll link the study down below, the conclusions they came to based upon the biology and the blood work done with it also, the mask actually reduced both performance and they reduced training response. So even though it was harder to do the squatting and the pressing with the mask on, they actually gained less endurance on them from doing them because the muscles didn't work as hard. And that's the thing that people need to remember when it comes to certain things, such as whether it's strength endurance or just straight endurance capacity for various endurance work. Just because something feels harder doesn't mean that the muscles themselves work harder. And that's the thing. People are hoping that by using these masks it would increase red blood cell count because that is the only pathway through which these masks would have improved endurance. Because if you're training and your muscles simply give out because they're not getting adequate oxygen, and therefore you have less endurance, the muscles aren't improving endurance. They're reducing their endurance. They're not getting as much training as if you had just given them more oxygen. So the whole idea there is that, well, since it's making it harder, your body's going to increase red blood cell count like at high altitude, right? Wrong. High altitude training doesn't actually increase the red blood cell count either. It's the sleeping at high altitude. And people always say, and this question always comes up when I raise this, well, if I just slept with the mask on, no, if you sleep with the mask on, you're basically simulating sleep apnea and you're going to damage your heart. It is so fucking stupid to do this that it boggles the mind. In fact, the training masks are so stupid that I've heard some people suggest that maybe we should let the idiots who think they'll work, who can't bother to read a physiology book and fall for every gimmick, just wear them so that they'll get heart damage and they can't pass their retarded genes on. I've actually heard a couple people suggest that. I, however, don't really agree with that. I don't think we should use the masks as a form of eugenics programs because we would lose a lot of really good athletes that way. The thing that you need to remember is that a lot of our fantastic athletes out there are not that smart. They're athletically gifted, but they're not always geniuses, guys. Some of them are actually, believe it or not, kind of stupid. Some are very intelligent, some are middle of the road, and some of them are really fucking stupid, but they're still very gifted athletes. We don't want to kill off those athletes just because they're dumb. Come on. Let's be realistic here. We don't want to give them heart damage just because they're stupid, because then we're still losing some great athletes. Let's not do that. Let's not let their stupidity hurt them. So we need to tell people, no, don't put the mask on. They won't work. The thing is, because ultimately the mask, whether it's training or sleeping, still do not simulate a high altitude environment. They don't reduce barometric pressure around your body. That's the big deal. That's why the decreased chambers that people do, when people go into these chambers that lower barometric pressure around them, they see an increase in the red blood cell count. Restricting your oxygen doesn't improve that. If it did, then people with sleep apnea would be better at endurance, because they would develop a higher red blood cell count to compensate for their sleep apnea. They don't. They just get heart damage. And basically that's what you're doing with the mask. You would be basically simulating sleep apnea, which again could just hurt you and kill you over time. So it's a really bad idea, and it won't actually work. And again, people always try to come in and chime in that these masks work, they work, this champion used them. It's like with anything else, guys. Some people are so genetically gifted, and they work so hard at what they do, and they get enough other things right that they get away with doing really stupid, fucking retarded shit and still being successful. But they're not successful because of the stupid shit they do. They're successful in spite of it. Think about that for a minute. I mean, how many athletes have you known who've made really bad mistakes with things they do, and they still go on to become champions? I mean, some of their lifestyle choices would reduce performance for anyone else. Look how many athletes go pro in various sports who go out binge drinking on the weekends and get really drunk and still go on to go in the NFL while they're in college. Do you think that they made it into the NFL because they binge drinked on Friday and Saturday nights, or do you think they were just good enough that they did it in spite of it? It's the same sort of thing here, guys. The mask actually reduce performance. They are a detriment. They will reduce the amount of performance you gain, whether it's with a high rep squat or whether it's running or doing jump rope. They won't stop completely the benefits from doing the exercise, but they will reduce it. And that's the whole point we're getting at here. People need to remember that. These things are a gimmick. They're a con with clever marketing that have got their way, made their ways into movies, but they are actually detrimental. And they're one of the worst scams I've seen come out in the last year. Mainly because they're actually being used by real athletes. And that's where the real scare is. There are people who aren't doing this stuff just to look a little bit better. All right, some of us could care less if people get scammed who just want nice abs and bigger biceps. A lot of people would say, well, screw them. Their goals aren't that important. If they want to do stupid stuff and be conned because of marketing and they can't go do some basic research, screw them. Well, the problem here is that you have high school athletes and people whose educations are on the line, who are willing to try anything to get an advantage so that they can get that scholarship or so they can go pro in their sport, and then they end up paying $80 for one of these masks, maybe money they can't really afford to give up, but they save up and get it anyway, especially a high school student. He's throwing away his money so that he can get this mask, and then maybe he doesn't quite get that last extra percent of performance he needs to earn his scholarship, and then he gets screwed out of an education because of it. I think that's a real problem when this is being promoted for athletes, when the truth is it's actually hurting their performance. And again, people shouldn't get their athletic scholarships and go pro in sports based upon their IQ. Just because they can't pass an IQ test and they're stupid and they can be convinced this stuff works, doesn't mean that their athletic ability is any less. They shouldn't be judged based upon that. And that's basically what cons like this do. And that's why there need to be more people saying, hey, this stuff doesn't really work. Don't listen to this bullshit. All the data says it shouldn't work. Anyone who knows basic physiology should already know these things won't work, because high altitude training itself doesn't even improve red blood cell count. It's the fact that you lived up there for the 30 days that actually increased your red blood cell count, not the fact that you trained there. In fact, we know people do even better if they fly back down to sea level every single day for their training and then fly back up to the mountains at night to sleep. Those people actually get even more performance than the people who do the pure high altitude for 30 days because they're getting the best of both worlds. Honestly, the best you could possibly do would be to sleep at high altitude and then sleep with an extra oxygen mask on so that you can get more oxygen while you're training. That would actually give you the best possible endurance, but you don't see people selling oxygen tanks because that wouldn't be considered safe. But that would actually do what people are hoping to do with these masks, would be for you to sleep in a barometric chamber at night and then put an oxygen mask on to get more oxygen when you're actually doing your endurance work. That would actually be the most scientific combination, not restricting your airflow while you're trying to train. But again, there's also inherent risk to running around with an oxygen mask on as well, with a big tank of oxygen. There are problems associated with that too. You're probably better off just running without anything on your face. Probably the safest bet. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.